Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my illustrious, esteemed colleague, the one and only Eric Henry. Eric, how are you doing?
Oh, man, Chip Brown. I am back in the Lone Star State, Austin, Texas, after an extended stay in Florida. Nice to get away, get back home for a little bit. It wasn't all vacation. Obviously, we did an episode of the Flagship there, and I had a chance to catch up with, a couple coaches, just friends of mine, things of that nature. So wasn't quite all vacation, Chip, but listen, I'm never going to turn down opportunity to get to the beach, avoid some of those weird shark attacks that have been going on. Oh, that's been Texas, not quite Florida. I mean, thoughts and prayers to folks who've been affected, but that's been wild. But get out to the beach, enjoy a little sunshine, some palm trees. But we are back in Austin, Texas. I am recharged, rejuvenated, and fired up because we've got SEC Media Days on the horizon, CB.
I was going to say, good timing for your vacation time and work time where you're getting away from things, because here comes SEC Media Days. Eric, we are previewing the Longhorns' debut at first SEC Media Days. And then we'll get to the first SEC football season that the Longhorns will be a part of. But before the actual season, we still have a little more talking season left. And we learned that Texas will be taking Quinn Ewers, left tackle Kelvin Banks, and fifth-year senior defensive back, the Swiss Army knife himself, Jahdae Barron. So, Eric, I think the rest of the SEC world is happy that Quinn Ewers will be available to talk to, because I noticed looking at Texas A&M, they're not bringing Connor Wegman. They're bringing two defensive guys. Of course, Mike Elko's a defensive guy. They're bringing Shamar Turner, the defensive lineman, Torian York, the sophomore linebacker, and Trey Zune, an offensive lineman. I'm like, man, come on, Mike Elko. We know you're a meat and potatoes guy, but can't you spice things up a little bit? Couldn't you give us Connor Wegman? Hell, I would have been happy if they'd have brought Connor Wegman and Colin Klein. But nonetheless, Texas is bringing its quarterback. Oklahoma is bringing Jackson Arnold, the quarterback who basically caused Dylan Gabriel to transfer to Oregon. And they're bringing Danny Stutzman, the T-shirt maker. I think he even got Brent Venables to model that T-shirt that he made after Oklahoma's win over Texas last year. Oklahoma doesn't fear Texas. Oklahoma only fears God, or some nonsense that Danny Stutzman thought was brilliant. And of course, they're bringing Billy Bowman, their hard-hitting safety, who Jatavian Sanders remembers quite well from the goal line in that Red River shootout last year. But Eric, I digress. We'll get into all these little nuances about the other teams in the SEC, but your thoughts on Quinn Ewers, Kelvin Banks, and Jahdae Barron as the players selected to represent Texas at SEC Media Days.
Chip, I'll start with Quinn. Let's just take a look back at what this offseason has kind of been for him, right? First off, he makes a decision to come back to Texas. And could you have made the argument that Quinn Ewers could have been, a late first-round pick or a second-round pick? Sure, right? I mean, there's no doubt the NFL places a premium on quarterbacks, and you see quarterbacks inevitably in every draft jump into the first round or wherever, right? Maybe there's one guy who slides, and for the most part, you see guys kind of, and I'm not assigning this to Quinn, but you see some guys who probably shouldn't go where they were drafted because there's a premium on quarterbacks. But where I'm going with that is this. He makes the decision to return to Texas. He ends up being one of the cover players for EA Sports NCAA Football 25. And now he gets this invite to attend SEC Media Days. Chip, you can't deny that being the quarterback of Texas, or the Texas quarterback, one of the other, but being a quarterback of the Longhorns is one of the premier jobs in college sports, especially when you are a stud. There are a lot of opportunities that will come with that. I think, and I don't want to veer too off topic, but I think that's going to be a marketing tool for Steve Sarkisian as he recruits that position. Certainly it's already worked with him getting guys like KJ Lacey and Dia Bell and Trey Owens and others, right? Really stockpiling that quarterback room. But I say all that to say, with that attention, notoriety, comes the fact that you will have to be the face of the franchise, the face of the program. There's no doubt the faces of this program, especially with Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy leaving, the heart and soul, some of the veterans from last year. It's Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian. So yes, this is something that Quinn will have to get used to. And, I don't want to Chip get too, inside baseball here, but we obviously have a chance to talk with Quinn routinely when it's Mondays or fall pressers and whatnot. And you let me know if you think I'm out of turn in saying this. I think Quinn is either, I would say he's probably 50% shy and maybe 50% not necessarily the most comfortable with the media scrum environment, right, Chip? Because when we get Quinn and he's at a podium, he's much better than when we're kind of all hovered over him, right? Like, especially when it's not a post game. So I think just for his own, future and being inevitably where he will be or where he wants to be as the face of an NFL franchise, this kind of stuff comes with it. So just to quickly touch on Kelvin and Jade, so I can give you a chance to kind of opine on what I said. No doubt that Banks should be there. He's arguably the top player on this team. If you're just talking about on-field production, 3 sacks allowed in 2 years. So he certainly is deserving. And Jade Byron is one of the best talkers on the team. You and I can attest to that Jade is one of the better quotes on the team, and someone who I think with him wanting to come back to, in part, to increase his draft stock, part of that means getting him out there, right? So people know who Jade Byron is, and you can talk about him. And Steve Sarkisian can talk about the impact of Jade on the defense on the team. So not surprised by any of the choices.
Yeah, and Kelvin Banks is he's an okay talker. Not the most, loquacious.
Yeah.
But I agree about Quinn Ewers. Ewers to me has like a law of diminishing returns on his capacity for media day. What I noticed about Quinn last year at media day was at the beginning, he was very talkative. He had good detailed answers, like talking about replacing Chick-fil-A with salmon to get his weight under control. By the end of the day, it was, no. So the goal is for you and I to get him alone immediately. First thing at SEC Media Days, even if we have to meet him in the tunnel getting off the bus, so that we get all the best answers from Quinn before his capacity for SEC Media Days dwindles down. But I'm just messing around. But Quinn it's his team, right? I mean, Steve Sarkisian has said it's Quinn's team. So he's the face of the franchise. He will be paraded through SEC Media Days, and he gets to do it just down the road from his hometown. He doesn't have to go to Hoover or Nashville,
Birmingham.
Birmingham. He's going to be just right down the road from South Lake. Should be comfortable. This is going to feel a lot like Big 12 Media Days for these Texas kids, because even though they've been going to AT&T Cowboys Stadium for Big 12 football media days, this will be at the Omni. The Big 12 media days used to be at the Omni before they started being held at Jerry World. So yeah, I think this will be interesting. And as far as Jade Byron, I mean, he's an interesting character, because we know he accepted his invitation to the Senior Bowl last year. Looked like he was on his way out the door and then changed his mind. I don't know, the video that he put out on his social media of him, getting the number 7 jersey from Michael Huff, who wore number 7 and won the Thorpe Award in 2005. If maybe Huffy had a conversation with him and said, "Why don't you come back and try to win that Thorpe Award?" or what? I mean, it wasn't the year that Jahdae Barron wanted. He was injured. He played through an ankle injury. He gave up a couple touchdowns in the last 2 games of the year, the Big 12 title game and in the Sugar Bowl, and he was moving around, and it just, we know he has high expectations for himself. His goal is to retire his mother, who runs a beauty salon in Austin, and he's a very thoughtful person, super talented football player, led the team in tackles for loss 2 years ago with 11.5. I mean, that's typically a stat for edge rushers and blitzers, not nickel corners. But that was also the year that he was with Gary Patterson. And we know he loved him some Jahdae Barron. We know that Gary was working with the secondary, and there's still some TV clips of him in the TCU game yelling at Jahdae to get up on the line because he knew what play was coming. Jahdae finished that game with 2.5 tackles for loss. Anyway, I say all that, and Sarkisian's been very complimentary of Jalen Gilbo, and reminding everyone that Jalen Gilbo started 3 games as a freshman 2 years ago, and now he's back. He's over the knee injury. He's fast again. Looks good. Well, Jalen Gilbo also plays the nickel corner, the star position in the Texas defense. Gilbo can play corner. Jahdae can play corner too, but he's really more of a safety. I mean, he'll play safety at the next level, most likely. So it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating to see how Pete Kwiatkowski and the defensive staff choose to use Jahdae Barron and Jalen Gilbo this year. So that's certainly a storyline we'll be covering there at SEC Media Days. Before we get in, because Eric and I did a 2-part series over the 4th of July weekend, going deep, kind of looking at some of the questions facing the Texas offense and the Texas defense. Before we get into that, Eric, since this is sort of our SEC Media Day preview, do you have, outside of Texas, are there any players or coaches, teams that you're especially interested in hearing from or talking to?
Not going to lie, I'm going to the big fish. Georgia, definitely want to hear from Kirby Smart, and they are bringing Carson Beck.
Carson Beck, maybe.
And that's the thing I think in my mind, Chip. You talked about Texas A&M not bringing a quarterback. I think, listen, quarterback quotes can kind of vary at times. Sometimes they're, great. Sometimes they're a little stale. But I think you got to bring your guy, right? Like, I think that's what impressed me about Brent Venables. There we go. I don't know why. I was still thinking of Danny Stutzman in the T-shirts, Chip, about Brent Venables bringing Jackson Arnold. Because if my memory serves me correct, Jackson Arnold is one of only 2 sophomores who will be attending this event, either 2 or 3 sophomores. But regardless of that, you got to bring your guy. But in this case, we all know the type of experience that Carson Beck brings and brings to the table, and certainly what he has experienced there at Georgia. So interested to hear from him. Jackson Arnold, as I mentioned, him being a sophomore, I would love to hear just kind of what he learned from Dillon Gabriel, because Dillon Gabriel, people forget, he's the nation's active leading passer, and that number's only climbing, right? With his return, probably gonna have another 3,500-yard passing year. Will finish his career with something like 18,000 passing yards. So love to hear what he's learned from Dillon Gabriel. There's certainly some other
Dillon Gabriel, 30 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions last year. Not bad.
Chip, I've obviously seen Dillon from times at UCF. I mean, whatever not to make this an Oklahoma podcast, but sure, you probably think Jackson Arnold has a higher ceiling than Dylan Gabriel, right? You probably think that just based on ability. However, for whatever you think of Dylan Gabriel, the dude's produced everywhere he's gone. So there is that. So
and he was the difference in the Red River Shootout last year.
His legs,
over 100 great. His legs, yes, 114 yards rushing.
There you go. So yeah, those are guys who jump out to me. Brian Kelly and LSU, definitely like to hear from them because just when you talk to people around, doing the radio circuit, a lot of people are high on Brian Kelly and that program and what they may be able to do. Josh Heupel as well at Tennessee. So those are a couple of guys off the top of my head that I'd definitely be interested from hearing from come next week.
Yeah. Carson Beck, baby. Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck, eyeball to eyeball as Heisman Trophy favorites going into the season. So that'll be fun to hear from both of them. All right. So Eric, we talked about the Going Deep 2-part series that we did over the 4th of July. And so let's kind of get into that a little bit. We started off talking about the biggest transfer addition on offense for Texas. Why don't you tell the folks who you went with?
I went with Isaiah Bond. Obviously I won't spoil who you went with. I'll leave you room to talk about that player. But for me, it's pretty simple. Could have gone a myriad of different ways. Certainly plenty of guys in the receiver room. Certainly Amari Niblack could have gone with. But in my mind, Isaiah Bond, this isn't to say necessarily he's going to be the best receiver on the team, or we'll see how things kind of shake out as far as ball distribution. But I think he fills a very pivotal role. While his speed remains to be seen as to whether or not he's going to be Xavier Worthy-like, that's probably a high standard, right? Xavier Worthy, now the 40-yard dash king of the NFL, beating John Ross. We know the impact of what a speed receiver does in a Steve Sarkisian offense. See John Ross. See any of the Alabama receivers, Jalen Waddle, guys like that. See Xavier Worthy, right? In my mind, that's a very specific role that Isaiah Bond fills in this offense. And for that reason, I think he's the most impactful transfer. Again, will he lead the team in receptions? Listen, there are a lot of good receivers on this team, right? We'll see what happens. But I think in terms of filling that role, that takes the top, forces opposing defenses to respect that guy who can take the top off of the defenses, which will open things up for other guys. I think that's a hugely crucial role. Isaiah Bond fills that.
Yeah, and I went with Silas Bolden for the Oregon State transfer receiver, grad transfer, for a lot of the same reasons you went with Isaiah Bond. Elite speed, experience, has the ability to play inside, outside, primarily played outside at Oregon State. Tough for his size, 5'8", and people immediately assume, oh, he's a inside receiver, but this guy can get open, and is a return specialist, can return kicks, returned only 3 punts last year, but one of them was for a touchdown. So very interested to see how Silas Bolden factors into the return game for Texas, and good hands, can catch the football. We won't go through every little segment in our preview, but let's talk about the biggest question mark on offense, Eric. You want me to go first, or you want to go first?
I can go first. I'll kind of be brief here. The depth on the offensive line was my selection for biggest question mark. And it's interesting, Chip, that Steve Sarkisian was, very adamant about the depth across his defensive line. Excuse me, the frontline starters on his defensive line, but was curious, kind of want to see more depth across his defensive line after spring. It's not that Texas doesn't have talent, right? It's just inexperienced. Outside of Cole Hudson, you don't have very many guys who've played at all. I mean, you look last year, Cam Williams, who is going to, for all intents and purposes, be the guy who is the heir apparent to Christian Jones, had a hell of a ball game against Kansas State last year, right? He filled in well. Maybe you're hoping that you have some guys, some Trevor Goosebees or NATO, or the list goes on. Guys outside of Cole Hudson who can step in for a game, for a game or two. But Connor Robertson, for example, right? We saw when Jake Majors went down. Give Connor Robertson credit, right? Tough ass to come in and be a center, coming in cold. But you did see a difference in that offensive line. I'm not here to say it made the difference in some of those goal line situations. I think, Chip, you and I can both say what probably made just as much of a difference is, going with that heavy package that doesn't give any running back room to see a hole when he's got big 300-pounders back there, trying to block for him. I'm not putting that all on Connor Robertson. But with that being said, if my memory serves me correct, Chip, Oklahoma had 4 or 5 sacks that day, right? And some of that falls on the center to set the protection and defend against some of those guys. So that's what stood out to me, Chip. It's not, listen, knock on wood, Kelvin Banks goes down, we got an issue, right? Your left tackle goes down, your all-star left tackle, you got an issue regardless. I don't care if it's a half or 6 games. But it's going to be interesting to see if a guy gets nicked up for a game or two or whatever it may be, how well the guys who are, again, just really inexperienced, not lacking talent, just inexperienced, how will those guys fill in for a stretch?
Yeah. And I said the biggest question mark for the offense going into this season is the run-pass balance. And the reason I said that is because I think the Texas running game is going to be really good with the veteran offensive line. If that group stays healthy, you've got Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter, Trey Wisner, and we know those are talented guys who can carry the load. They gained confidence at the end of the season when they had to take over for Jonathan Brooks when he went down in November with the torn ACL. The question is, with Quinn Ewers and all these talented newcomers at receiver trying to establish themselves, does Sarkisian stick with the run when it's there? And a little bit, I'm kind of flashing back to the first quarter of the Sugar Bowl when CJ Baxter runs for 16 yards on the first series, and then Texas throws it 3 times right after that. Incomplete, punt. And why don't you just keep running that exact same play or see if there's a weakness there, or some adjustment that they're not making. And we know Sarkisian will run the ball late in games. That's the goal, is to run it and close games out. But my question is more so in the first quarter, when Sarkisian has a script, maybe, and we know he loves to get his quarterback in rhythm. So, even Malik Murphy in his first start against BYU, I think he threw it like 7 times to start the game. So, the run-pass balance, if the Texas running game is super strong and you can kind of do what Michigan did last year and just maul people with your running game. Michigan ran it 32 straight times to finish the Penn State game. Will you do that? And so, kind of a first world problem, but you and I both agreed that the biggest position battle on offense is the battle kind of to get into the top 3 at the receiver position. And we also agreed that the player feeling the most pressure on offense is going to be Quinn Ewers, because he's the man and is going to be seen as a guy who's expected to help carry this team at times. close out games, play the way he did against Alabama last year at an elite level. But and listen, if you're not a member of Horns 24/7, now's a great time to become a member, because we do have a 50% off annual membership special going on right up until the start of SEC Media Days. So jump in so that you can read the rest of these going deep packages and all the other, the Insider, the Stampede, all of our VIP content. And now's the time to do it. If you go to horns247.com, you'll see the promo right there on the front page. But Eric, sleeper player, which is a question I'll be asking everyone at SEC Media Days. That player who could surprise, could make a big impact. Tell everyone who you picked for offense.
Man, if my memory serves me correct, Chip, did I not go with? See, now I gotta look this up. Hang on a second. See, if we wrote this.
Tell you, Trey Wisner.
Okay, I did go with Trey Wisner.
Yes, sir.
I was, and that's folks. I was hoping I could remember all of mine from memory. Clearly, I failed there. I know who mine was on defense, and that's Trey Moore. I was torn between him and Javion Cole. Anyhow, Trey Wisner. The reason I chose him for my sleeper, quite frankly, is you've heard Chip on the podcast talk a lot about his conversation with running backs coach Tashard Choice at the Sugar Bowl in reference to Jaden Blue, right? With that analogy to Jahmyr Gibbs. When I spoke with Tashard Choice, the player I asked him about was Trey Wisner, and Tashard Choice lit up. And again, granted, if you ever had a conversation with Tashard Choice, he is certainly not lacking enthusiasm or energy or a lack of words. However, there did seem, Chip, to be a special kind of gleam in his eye. And the thing that stood out to me is whether it's Tashard Choice or CJ Baxter or Jaden Blue, they all talk about Trey Wisner's work ethic, Chip. Last guy on the field to leave, first guy there, that he pushes those guys who are in front of him in the depth chart, right? That just has to remind you of a Roschon Johnson, a guy who can step in, make a name for himself on special teams, do all the little things. I think there's going to be room for Trey Wisner, as a guy who whether he excels at pass pro or, just in little various situations, they're going to be 3 running backs who get touches this year. Now, granted, of course, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on in the podcast as to what the load is going to be on CJ and Jaden Blue. Chip, one of the hypotheticals is their rushing output. I won't spoil the question just yet. However, there's going to be a need for a third back. And whether that's a guy in the passing game or a guy in pass pro, a guy just will do all those dirty things, the dirty work, the intangibles. Not saying CJ and Jaden Blue won't, but I think Trey Wisner is a guy who the best way I can sum it up, Chip, is I think when he's on the field, he's going to make an impact. And why do I feel that way? Because the dude did it last year on special teams. And that tells me those players, Chip, who just whatever opportunity they get, you notice them. That's a trait that's unique.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that pick because I think the future is really bright for Trey Wisner. I went with Ryan Wingo, the just 5-star freshman receiver. Eric, you can attest to this. Steve Sarkisian, it seemed every time we talked to him during spring ball, was pointing out praise for Ryan Wingo, mature beyond his years, football IQ, playmaking, and then everyone saw a glimpse of it in the orange-white spring game, the 56-yard go route where he just runs by everybody, and even that 3-yard touchdown catch that turned out to be the game winner, where he had to adjust his body to make an over-the-shoulder catch. It was similar to the adjustment that A.D. Mitchell made on the 35-yard catch against TCU to close out that game. And I just I'm not the only one who has a big feeling about Ryan Wingo as a freshman. I think I think he could end up leading the team in touchdown catches. So that's why I picked Ryan Wingo. All right, let's get over to the defense. We'll make it snappy again. Get over to horns247.com and read the entirety. We're only giving you little snippets of our Going Deep series, offense and defense, questions facing the Texas offense, questions facing the Texas defense. And Eric, your best transfer addition on defense.
Yeah, Chip, I remember this way. I went with Javion Cole, correct? I went Javion Cole for transfer, or Trey Moore for
best transfer addition defense. You went with Trey Moore.
Trey Moore, right? Okay. So I went with Javion Cole as a surprise, and then Trey Moore as transfer addition. Okay, there we go. Got those flipped. Here's the thing with Trey Moore. Again, what you just mentioned with Ryan Wingo, Chip, as far as Steve Sarkisian's being, really effusive with praise. That could be easily applied to Trey Moore. And that wasn't just, and you and I have written about it. I was there at the TD Club of Houston when Steve Sarkisian was asked, who's a guy that we don't know right now that we're going to need to know? And Steve Sarkisian, of course, he's got a lot of guys got to think about. And the one who came off his lips was Trey Moore. But that praise has been consistent even throughout spring. My thing, and I'm probably a little biased, when it comes to the G5 guys, because I whether it's, shout out to my guy Cody Van Oppen, DC over at Cal Poly, who gave me a lot of great stuff about Javion Cole, or just the fact that I covered Trey Moore's really breakout game, Florida and National. They come to Miami, a couple of, I think it was 3.5 tackles for loss.
3.5 sacks.
3.5 sacks. There we go. 3.5 sacks. It's just an outstanding game against FIU. And no one's going to compare the FIU offensive line to what it'll face at the SEC. However, the things that were really apparent, Chip, that were consistent all the way through, raw pass rush ability. What impressed me is that his overall, his ability to make plays at the line behind the line of scrimmage was even just as impressive year 2, Chip, when teams at that level, you don't have a Baron Sorrell and an Ethan Burke or a Tavondre Sweat and a Byron Murphy, for the most part, right? You got one guy who teams can go in and say, that's the guy we got game plan against. And come hell or high water, all right, if our one guy can't get it done, we're going to chip. And if that chip doesn't get it done, we're going to double and triple team. Those things didn't matter. That's, as someone who's covered group of 5 football, is what stands out to me about the guys who I think can be successful at the higher level. And of course, the NFL. Can they, when teams say, we're going to throw everything, the entire kitchen sink at you, and you still have success? That stands out to me, and Trey Moore was that guy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing a player top 22 player ranking on the Texas roster, and Trey Moore is in that ranking. Again, if you're not a VIP member, annual member at Horns 24/7, we got so much good content going on right now. Just go over to the front page and grab that 50% off promo for annual membership. My biggest transfer addition on the defensive side, Bill Norton, the defensive tackle from Arizona, who spent his first 4 years at Georgia and was a member of both national championship teams in 2021 and 2022. He was obviously stuck behind guys like Devontae Wyatt and Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. So he didn't get the reps. He transfers to Arizona and becomes a big part of Johnny Nanson's defense at Arizona that had a big turnaround in stopping the run. They went from giving up 200 yards rushing per game 2 years ago to giving up 118 yards per game last year rushing. And he's 6'6", 325. He knows what he's doing. He's kind of a clone of Alfred Collins. And I think he's going to be the starter next to Alfred Collins because he is a nose tackle. He's a guy who can head up on the center. He can line up in that one technique right there between the center and the guard. And so I think he's a key player in that ability to stop the run. And I know that was your your big question facing the defense. My big question is the improvement kind of across the board, but really in the communication in the secondary, because there was so much substituting in and out at safety. They rotated 5 guys at times. Jade Byron was like, I needed to look around to see if I'd already told the guy who's in the game what to expect. That's got to get better. And again, we're not going to go through all these, but Eric, I wanted you to answer or when we talked about in the biggest question mark facing the Texas defense.
I went with the run defense.
You went with the run defense, and I wanted to give you a chance to explain that a little bit.
I'll make it quick. Again, Chip, I just, and we'll get into the DT position in a little bit. I wrote that piece, and I've seen some people on the board say, you guys are making too much of Sweat and Murphy's loss. I'm like, did we not watch the same Texas team last year? What do you mean too much of Sweat and Murphy's loss? Those guys were far and away the best defensive tackles in the nation for the majority of the year. Guys, listen, it's not that Sweat and Murphy weren't good players. They were great players. The thing is, they were so much better, Chip, than anyone else in the nation that, no disrespect to Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Bill Norton, you don't just step in and fill that. So starting with the interior of the defensive line, and of course that trickles down to guys like Anthony Hill's going to play up and defend the run, and the linebackers and et cetera. Where does this group land? If Texas defends the run the same way they did last year, it's great, and we're probably talking about a national championship team, to be honest. I don't see that happening. Do they fall to 140 yards a game, 150? That still puts them as a top 3rd team in the nation, but that's almost double what they allowed last year. If they fall at around 110, 115, that still puts them in the upper echelon, top 15, top 20 schools in the nation. If they do that, in my mind, Chip, that gives them the best chance to what I believe will be an 11-1 or 10-2 team. If they fall any further than that, there are some games in the SEC, like a Georgia, like even a Michigan. You know, Sharon Moore is going to run the football that you could drop. So that's why my big question is the run defense.
Yeah. And we're going to get into your defensive tackle preview here in a minute. But you mentioned your sleeper player, your surprise player, Javion Cole.
Yes.
I like that pick.
The big thing for me with Javion Cole is, at the G5 level, guys will slip through the cracks. I mean, that's happened for years, right? That's not just a recent thing. But we're talking about a kid who went to Cal Poly, dominated. 2 picks in his first league game. Goes to San Jose State, is the top-rated cornerback in the Mountain West last year. That's not just coincidence. Guys who excel at every level, those guys tend to excel wherever they play. Secondly, came into college football as a 17-year-old. Kid's just 19 now. I think getting into Texas in that weight program with Torrey Becton, that's the missing ingredient, Chip. Again, I'm probably biased, but one of the big things with Group of 5 football is, kids aren't, I mean, I'm not saying there's not food there, but it's not Texas. When God bless Tavondre Sweat said, when you come to Texas, you got all the food you want, right? Remember that line? It's not that. It's not, again, I'm not shading the San Jose State nutrition program or Cal Poly. It's not what he's going to get at Texas. That kid's going to come here and get in the weight room, and everything is going to come together. The on-the-field stuff, the physical development, that's I'm going with Javion Cole.
Yeah. And I had a chance to get in touch with Javion Cole and ask him a couple questions. And, I congratulated him on being the highest graded returning SEC cornerback this season, according to Pro Football Focus, with a grade of 86.2. And his response was, thank you. Not focused on that. I got more to achieve. And this is a guy who's hungry, and has a big old chip on his shoulder. And I loved when I asked him about, coming to Texas. He said, because I believe I'm going up against the best wide receiver room in the country every day in practice. And so by going up against, Isaiah Bond and Matt Golden and Silas Bolden and Ryan Wingo and Jonte Cook and DeAndre Moore every day in practice, he's getting the kind of reps he needs to elevate and go to the next level. And so just really impressed with him. That's going to be a great position battle. He and Gavin Holmes, guy with 4.3 speed. And, obviously the young guys, Kobe Black and Wardell Mack and all that. But I think you're going to have Malik Muhammad at the boundary. I think he's kind of solidified himself. But Gavin Holmes, Javion Cole, it's going to be a great position battle to watch going into fall camp. All right, Eric. For my sleeper player on defense, I went with Colton Vasek. Now, the edge position is crowded. I mean, you've got Barron Sorrell and Ethan Burke back as returning starters. You've got Trey Moore and Colin Simmons. You've got Justice Finkley, who's got experience, and then you've got Colton Vasek, who redshirted last year, really was hurt. He had a back injury, which always makes you a little nervous when it's a back injury for a player that young. But he showed up in the spring, and the coaches were like, okay, he's back. He's good. And we know Christian Jones nicknamed him Baby Bosa in fall camp a year ago. He's got that length. He and Ethan Burke were bookends on the Westlake high school team, for God's sake. They're both like 6'6", 6'7", with, Burke has a 83-inch wingspan. So, and Colton Vasek's dad, Brian Vasek, was a defensive lineman in the early 90s opposite Tony Brackens, and is Austin Westlake's defensive line coach, tough guy, nasty, and Colton Vasek is nasty and a finisher. So hope he stays healthy, because I think he's going to get on the field and can help in that way. All right, Eric, let's touch on anything we didn't touch on in your defensive tackle position preview. Again, all of us have been contributing to these position previews. I think they are really good reading. So we've got the recruiting guys. We got Hank South and Jordan Scruggs talking about, what's going on in recruiting at these positions. And, Eric's kind of bringing it all together. And so the defensive tackle position, Eric, it's going to be the focus of everybody who wants to see if Texas's defense can rise to this challenge this year.
Chip, we've talked a lot about it over the offseason. So I'm going to try to just hone in on one thing. Again, Texas is going to play 5 defensive tackles. Chip, Sweat and Murphy were so good, but what we probably haven't talked about a lot is that guys 3 through 5, all graded out by Pro Football Focus as winners, either above average or good. Starting with AC, who had a grade of just shy of 80, 79.9 last year overall grade. That's really good for your third defensive tackle. That's great, Chip, for your third defensive tackle. Trill Carter, Vern Broughton were really, really good for your 4th and 5th defensive tackles. We'll see what happens. You have said that you see AC and Bill Norton. I had it as AC and Vernon Broughton, but again, we'll see. That's why you should take a look at the read, because you're getting different perspectives. It's worth every penny there. But my big thing is just to see guys 3 through 5. Right? Let's pretty much shoe in Bill Norton as one of those guys. So let's go 4 through 5. Tia Savea, Jermaine Lole, those guys come in. They're going to be competing with Sadir Mitchell, Jere Bledsoe. I'll say it here. I've written it. I do not think, Chip, that Steve Sarkisian brings in Jermaine Lole and Bill Norton had he been comfortable, for lack of a better word, with Sadir Mitchell and Jere Bledsoe and Aaron Bryant, right? You have to believe that, because if he's comfortable with those guys, you either you go elsewhere with those scholarships, or you don't bring, or maybe, as Steve said, he just wants all the big humans, and we're just gonna make it one big, Royal Rumble battle royal until we'll see who's the last man standing. Who knows? Only Sark does, but that's where I'm interested to see in terms of guys 4 through 5, because you're gonna get north of 220 snaps for those 4 through 5 guys. How do those guys fill in, and where do they compare to last year's group, Chip?
Yeah, and I'll say it again. You're going to know week 2 in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
If Michigan's offensive linemen are getting to the Anthony Hill and David Benda, there are issues, because offensive linemen were not getting to Jalen Ford and Anthony Hill last year, thanks to the presence of Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. So it's going to be exciting to watch in fall camp to see how Jere Bledsoe and Sadir Mitchell come along, because I put them as my pressure players on defense, the ones feeling the most pressure. And they may not feel the most pressure with all the guys that came in ahead of them this year, but they're all gone next year. I mean, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Bill Norton, Tia Savea, Jermaine Lole, they're all gone after this season. And then it's Jere Bledsoe and Sadir Mitchell, you would expect, leading the next wave of defensive tackles the way that Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton are leading the wave this year. So they need to come on. They need to have a good fall camp. Jere Bledsoe did finish spring strong. Sadir Mitchell, I think, was engaged. The coaches, feel good. He didn't leave. He's still here. They want him. They want him to develop. And so very important for them this fall camp to take big steps. All right, Eric, everyone will enjoy your latest schedule preview. The Oklahoma Sooners. Oh, Nelly. This is the beginning of the back-to-back gauntlet for the Texas Longhorns, because we know the Georgia Bulldogs are the week after Oklahoma, but let's start with Oklahoma.
Georgia preview will be out later this week, but as you said, let's start with the Oklahoma Sooners. The number one thing that I am looking at, it's that transition from Dillon Gabriel to Jackson Arnold. Oklahoma, Chip, if Texas, as you alluded to in the last Flagship Podcast, needs to buy the SEC a year's worth of steak dinners, Oklahoma needs to take the SEC out to, insert. I want to throw a brand under the bus, right? So insert dollar brand of fast food, right, Chip? They get all the teams. They get LSU. They get Tennessee. They get Bama. They get everybody, right? And in addition to Texas. So they will face Tennessee before the Red River Shootout. I think we'll have a good idea of what Jackson Arnold can be by the time the Red River Shootout rolls around, because of the teams they do face early on. But that's my biggest thing. Dillon Gabriel, Chip, we said it. That's who broke Texas last year. It was a veteran quarterback who knew how to manipulate the pocket, athletic enough to step up and run, make the plays, make the throws. That's who broke Texas. Plain and simple. Now, granted, of course, Texas' inability to cash in at the red zone goal line probably made a big difference, but Dillon Gabriel's the backbreaker. He's the one who took him down and scored to regain the lead in the fourth quarter. So that's my number one thing. Number two, just taking a look at some of the playmakers they lost to get the receiver position. They've brought in some guys, most notably the kid from Purdue, Deion Burks. Yes,
Deion Burks, yeah.
Burks, plural. Also a guy who I get a chance to see, Chip, Austin Stogner, no longer with the program. I was graduated. Jake Roberts, keep an eye on him. I saw him when he was at North Texas. I'm forgetting where Jake was last year. It was a power school. I'm forgetting where. But I saw Jake Roberts when he was a CUSA player, tight end. crafty tight end, probably a guy who gets reunited with his former head coach in North Texas, Seth Luttrell. Will probably get used a lot as well. So keep an eye on those guys as replacements. But yeah, that transition from Dylan Gabriel to Jackson Arnold, that's it.
Yeah. And defensively, they went all in on Dominic Williams.
Yeah.
And you have Danny Stutzman back. You have Billy Bowman back. They should be really strong right up the backbone, right up the middle of their defense. So defensively, I think Brent Venables feels like he's got a team that he can be proud of from a defensive standpoint, and that's bad news for everybody. So yeah, if Jackson Arnold can come in and be the 5-star quarterback, he struggled in the bowl game. We know that he threw 3 interceptions, but if he comes out looking like the 5-star quarterback that he is, and he is a dual threat, he can make plays with his legs. Texas defense going to have to be on point. That game's going to be a really, really good battle, in my opinion. So good stuff there. All right. Eric, we need to get to some take it or leave it. Get over to Horns 24/7 for all the rest. You want to read about Aaliyah Crump, the number 4 basketball prospect in the nation in the 2025 recruiting cycle, who just committed to Texas. We got you there. All the latest baseball roster tracking. And congratulations to Lulu Sun, the former Longhorn, who helped the Texas women's tennis team win a national championship in 2021. She just got to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. All right, Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
I'm ready, Chip.
Let's go. All right, and if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on right into some take it or leave it. Eric, I'm going first. Quinn Ewers throws for 40 touchdowns this season. Last year, he threw for 22. This year, Quinn Ewers throws for 40 touchdowns. Take it or leave it.
Chip, you can confirm this. First, I'm going to leave it. Is the record for touchdown passes by a Texas quarterback 33?
34 by Colt McCoy in 2008.
That number seemed low to me. I don't know why. I guess and I'm not shading 34 TD passes, but I was like, really? Anyhow, this offense is going to be so well balanced in my mind. I don't see Quinn hitting 40. I do think he has a real shot at eclipsing Colt McCoy's record, but I don't think he quite gets to 40, Chip. So I'm leaving it. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm leaving this. I do think that he breaks Colt McCoy's record of 34. But if we're both wrong, that's good news for Quinn Ewers, because Mac Jones threw for 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in 2020, and Jaden Daniels threw for 40 touchdowns last year. So it's kind of the magic number to go to New York, it seems. All right, Eric, take it or leave it, number 2.
Take it or leave it, number 2. CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue both rush for over 1,000 yards this year. CB, take it or leave it.
I can't quite go here. I'm going to have to leave it. I do think they come close. I tend to think it'll be Jaden Blue who runs for 1,000 yards and CJ Baxter right behind him. But I'm going to leave this. Eric, how about you?
I am leaving it as well. It's a lot.
You're going to take Baxter, I bet, because he's your Florida favorite.
Listen, CJ's an Orlando guy. Shout out to Edgewater High. But people have asked, why am I so high on CJ Baxter? Because Steve Sarkisian was really high on CJ Baxter last year.
Started him.
Don't look at it. Don't like LeVar Burton said in Reading Rainbow. Don't take my word for it, right? Like you listen to Steve Sarkisian. I think CJ will top 1,000 yards, and Jaden Blue will definitely have a really good year. But I don't see both of them reaching 1,000 yards.
Okay. All right. Take it or leave it, number 3. All right. Eric, no Texas player finishes with 1,000 yards receiving this year. Take it or leave it.
This one was the one I was most torn on, because if you look at Xavier Worthy, it was 70 for 10-15. And that's off the top of my head. I know it's pretty darn close.
Yeah,
last year
he did crest 1,000 yards receiving last year,
but it wasn't
right. It wasn't overwhelming.
Yeah, I am going to leave it, Chip. I think there's so many weapons. I think the ball distribution, I could see a lot of guys around that 800 mark. I could see 3 guys around that 800 mark. I could see a 4th guy around that 600 mark. I could see a tight end around that 500 600 mark. I'm going to take this. I don't think one crosses 1,000.
Yeah, I agree. And if you look at Texas in recent years, Xavier Worthy did have 1,000 yards receiving, but Texas did not have a 1,000-yard receiver in 2022, in 2021, or 2020. Their last 1,000-yard receiver before Xavier Worthy was Devin Duvernay. In 2019, he had 1,386 yards receiving. I agree with you. I think they're going to have so many playmakers, and the ball distribution moves around. So
now, Chip, there is one caveat that I will sneak in. I looked it up. So I said 70 for 10-14. It was 75 for 10-14. It's expanded playoff. So I didn't push you to ask you where we're talking in terms of how many games. That's the only caveat that I'll throw in there.
That's a good point. It's a good point, because you and I both said it's a college football playoff or bust season. So even if they don't make the SEC title game, they would play at least 13 games.
Correct.
Maybe 14, maybe 15. I'm still going to take this for now.
Same.
Still going to take this for now. All right. Good stuff. All right. We got you a little bit, excited about SEC Media Days. Eric and I will be recording the Flagship Podcast from who knows where next week, somewhere in the Omni Hotel in Dallas in the middle of SEC Media Days. So everybody, thanks so much for being a part of this episode of the Flagship Podcast. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Don't forget about that 50% off annual membership. Go sign up right now, because it's going to expire before we get into the heart of SEC Media Days. So do that right now. Also, like and subscribe this podcast. And until next time, stay safe and keep the faith.